My passions from a common spring. Sophia backed away, eyes darting left and right, her shield covering her body, ready to shift to protect her legs at a moment. Her Tempest Jade rod was bloodied in her hand, but despite her exhaustion it did not waver. The two heavily armoured soldiers kept their own shields raised, advancing carefully. She and her coven had shown them the danger of underestimating their power. The moment one of them overextended, she could send them flying into the bitter sea, and they all knew that the steel that so effectively protected them from blades and arrows was useless against her magic. Of the rest of her unit, she could see only Rasmus. He lay on his back, staring sightless up at the sky, 2 crossbow bolts nested in his chest, in his heart. She couldn't afford to look at him for too long, to take her eyes off the 2 soldiers for too long. The chaos of battle raged around them, ships burning and sinking, spells and steel clashing, voices shouting or crying, smoke and salt and blood mixing together in the attar of war. She hoped the others were below decks, somehow, securing the vessel as they had been ordered. At any moment, perhaps, her comrades would erupt from below, put down these arrogant dogs, capture the ship. Surely all she had to do was keep them busy for a little longer. Surely. "Come on, then," she spat with a bravado she did not feel. "I do not have all day." She didn't speak a lot of their grating common speech, only enough to threaten and brag. She didn't expect any of them to be able to speak a civilized tongue, so was startled when the one on the left spoke haltingly in the language of her home. "You are beaten. Give up. You will not be hurt." The warrior's accent was atrocious, like they were speaking through a mouthful of mush. She couldn't see their face, hidden behind the same encasing steel that sheathed their body. In response, she spat a word she had learned was a terrible insult to the Commonwealth. The other soldier growled deep in their throat and advanced half a step. A mistake, and a potentially fatal one. Sophia darted forward, swinging her rod and speaking the words of power without thought as she had been taught to do in battle. She flowed from one motion to the next, and with a roar, the soldier went sprawling backwards, over the rail, out of sight, into the welcoming embrace of the bloody water. She didn't see them fall. She was already spinning to strike their companion in the same movement, invoking the power of her implement, feeling the power of summer erupt through her. The angle was wrong, though. They were hurled back across the deck into the mast, hitting it with crushing force, held in place for a few precious moments by the power of her magic. The sudden pain in her leg was excruciating. It robbed her of breath, too immediate and intense even to let her scream. She went down heavily, sprawling. Her knee was shattered. A snub, vicious little bolt, buried almost to the fletching, protruded from her mage armour. Tears of agony blurred her vision. She scrambled for her rod, and a second bolt took her in the shoulder, tearing sinew and shattering bone. She cried out this time, tried to sit up, tried to bring her shield to bear, but she couldn't seem to focus. Her limbs wouldn't obey her. As her vision started to darken, she saw the 3rd Commonwealth soldier walking slowly toward her across the deck, carefully loading the 3rd and final bolt into their crossbow. She tried to find something defiant to snarl, but she couldn't seem to remember anything pithy for some reason. "I hate you," she whispered at last, as her enemy raised the crossbow toward her. Overview. Each season, the civil service prepares a summary of the Empire's relationship with the foreign nations, based on communications received from their ambassador, along with any useful intelligence gathered from other sources. While the Senate and the other houses of imperial power may respond to these offers, it is important to note that it is the appropriate ambassador that the foreign power will expect to hear from. Their communication with the foreign power is the primary element that will determine the tenor of any response. War in the East. The Lantir War continues to rage between the Commonwealth and the Principalities of Yarm. Diplomats from both sides appear confident that their nation has the upper hand, but reading between the lines, it seems that neither is actually winning as such. Militarattaché Schoningen indicates that the Commonwealth armies continue to make good use of some of the battlefield rituals shared with them by the Imperial Conclave. The Principalities of Yarm continue to appreciate the decision of the Empire not to become involved in a boots-on-the-ground capacity. There is no indication that either side is going to declare victory anytime soon, but likewise, there is no indication that they plan to back down. Both the Commonwealth and Yarm are proud, stiff-necked nations, and this conflict isn't really about Lantyr so much as it is a clash of ideology, for all that the magician princes might claim otherwise. It is a bitter irony, perhaps, that both sides are motivated by the desire for liberty and freedom. The Commonwealth wishes to embrace the people of Lantyr and the other border nations in their common good, where all are able to achieve their potential in service to the wider picture. The Yarmish, on the other hand, are fighting for the right to self-determination, to live their lives and follow their traditions as they have for more centuries than the Commonwealth has even existed. Those traditions might be unpalatable to the members of the Liberty Pact, but there is more to it than a simplistic hatred of slavery. Or at least, so Lord Magister Anton Trescher insists. The Commonwealth, he argues, attempt to force everyone to believe and act as they instruct, while the Principalities allow people to explore their own understanding of creation and make their own choices. Regardless, the war continues. It's hard to say for sure, but from some reports made by merchants visiting Leerdam and Volkovar, it certainly seems as if the Commonwealth are slowly being pushed back. Yarmish battlefield magic is just too potent and effective against armies that, even with donations from the Empire, struggle to match the power of their enchantments. But it is far too early to say for sure how this war will eventually end. Commonwealth. The Commonwealth are a militaristic nation committed to the idea of ensuring the greatest good to the greatest number of people. They are perhaps the closest allies the Empire has among the great powers of the known world. This is in no small part due to their membership of the Liberty Pact, dedicated to destroying the abhorrent practice of slavery across the world. Both nations are dedicated to extending their influence over the whole world, and know that only one of them can fulfill their grand ambition. But for now, their rivalry with the Empire remains amicable. The Empire shared their mastery of magic with the magicians of the Commonwealth, and Commonwealth soldiers fought and died alongside the Freeborn in the fall of Sirog. Their ambassador to the Empire is Militarattaché Ludkana Schoningen of Die Stahlhalle in the port city of Volkovar, a veteran soldier who reports to the generals who hold the reins of political power in their nation. An old campaigner, they generally speak plainly and as honestly as any politician can when dealing with their imperial counterpart. War by other means. Militarattaché Schoningen thanks Ambassador Pridetalker for the work they have done securing a significant investment of imperial crystal mana into the Commonwealth war effort. A request last season for a significant amount of mana has been fulfilled, and Commonwealth merchants have delivered the agreed-on payment in the form of soldier's booze, blood clay, spice paste, and hero stones. The mana is being put to good use, according to the Militarattaché. On the matter of another shipment of mana, Die Stahlhalle concurs with the ambassador's proposal. For 200 more mana, a shipment of 40 Soldaten Trunk, 40 Würzpaste, and 20 Blutlehm will be delivered to the hopefully newly completed embassy. Unfortunately, on the matter of the proposed artisanry, Die Stahlhalle is less interested. It is not a lack of ritual paraphernalia that is afflicting the Commonwealth armies. The coven stones the ambassador mentions are not unknown, but simply shift the economic burden from crystal mana to the materials that are desperately needed to equip soldiers with magical weapons and armour. It is a fine idea, but not one that Militarattaché Schoningen feels is worth taking advantage of at this time. As to the matter of the Winterfolk runesmith, as far as Militarattaché Schoningen knows, the artisans of the Commonwealth do know how to create a number of magic items that their imperial counterparts do not. However, these crafters balk at the very idea of passing their knowledge to the Empire simply because right now they have a monopoly on both the little iron fists and their more complex cousins. Selling that knowledge to the Empire at any price would ultimately be thieving from their future selves, their descendants and their colleagues. It is selfish, but it is hard to argue that it is not also good sense. The Liberty Pact. Die Stahlhalle is a little surprised to receive a summons from the nation of Axos to attend a meeting of the Liberty Pact during the winter solstice. Obviously, as signatories to the Liberty Pact, Axos has every right to convene the pact. The Commonwealth, however, are not entirely amused. Military Attaché Schoningen asks directly if this has been done at the urging of the Empire. Obviously they will attend, and it is difficult to turn down a congress that takes place via the Caucus Forum given how easy it is to reach. But they are initially uncertain as to what is going on. When the Aksu indicate their intention to call for the removal of the requirement that Pact members embargo the principalities of Yarm, the Commonwealth progresses from uncertainty to annoyance. Does the Imperial Voice of Liberty also intend to call a meeting of the Pact in spring? For their part, the Commonwealth indicate that they will again be presenting a motion to remove Axos from the Liberty Pact and restrict membership to the Great Powers rather than any number of smaller nations regardless of their attitude to slavery. They have little hope of it succeeding, given they anticipate the Empire and the Aksu will vote together again to defeat such a motion, but perhaps their Imperial allies are prepared to see sense on this matter. They are also considering a motion before the Pact that is a little more delicate matter. They are interested to hear from the ambassador what the Empire's opinion on the other summer amendment, that requiring that signatory nations maintain free trade with other signatories. Frankly, the Commonwealth is beginning to feel the pinch of their ongoing war with the principalities of Yarm. Apart from the Sarkafan-Delves, they are broadly only trading with other members of the Pact, and the lack of trade tariffs is beginning to make itself apparent. Fighting a war costs money, and not being able to raise any taxes from mercantile activity is proving to be a significantly greater burden than they had initially expected. Perhaps the ambassador would be good enough to speak with Jarek Silktongue, the Voice of Liberty, about these matters, and perhaps give their Commonwealth opposite number a heads-up on the Empire's intentions for this meeting. Further information about the upcoming convention of the Liberty Pact can be found in the Troop of Echoes, Wind of Fortune. Questionable Confederacy. In response to the concerns expressed by the Commonwealth, Ambassador Pridetalker has offered reassurances that the Iron Confederacy has indeed abandoned the practice of slavery. They directly referenced the opinion of Tethros Izuri I Erego, ambassador to the Iron Confederacy, who apparently believes their practices meet the minimum criteria laid out in the Liberty Pact. While Military Attaché Schoningen still expresses some skepticism, she reiterates that unless the Empire forces the issue by trying to get the Confederacy to become signatories to the Liberty Pact, they remain broadly a matter for the Empire to deal with. All that said, however, it is likely that the Commonwealth delegate will wish to discuss the matter with the Voice of Liberty at the upcoming meeting of the Liberty Pact, at least off the record. Diplomacy and Philosophy. Military Attaché Schoningen is pleased to hear that the materials to finish the Diplomatenschloss have been secured. There are, of course, still concerns about the risk of Yarmish and Commonwealth vessels in close proximity along the river, but she is reassured that the intervention of the Assembly of Vigilance may be a first step in ensuring no conflict occurs in Imperial waters. What steps have been taken in this regard? She queries. She is interested to hear that the Highborn are interested in fostering good relations and open dialogues on military doctrine, trade and philosophy, but is a little uncertain as to how this might best be achieved. A trade enclave is possible, certainly, once the Diplomatenschloss is completed, but obviously there is a war on, and much of the Commonwealth attention is directed at the ongoing conflict. A symposium to discuss moral philosophy will likely interest the scholars and students of the universities, but for the moment must remain theoretical. On the other hand, she points out, there is an entire delegation of Commonwealth scholars and philosophers in the Empire at the moment. Professor Gelberg and his team are just the kind of people to be able to rigorously discuss such matters. Several of the academics have military experience as well, of course. Perhaps the Highborn could make use of Dibirtilung to appraise how they might secure stronger ties with the Commonwealth in matters of trade and such. Speaking of the professor, he and his team remain in the Empire. They have recently completed an examination relating to sieges in Holberg, and their aid can once again be secured at the autumn equinox by anyone prepared to participate in the open auction for their services. Funerary rites. Militar Attaché Schoningen is not an authority on Commonwealth funerary practices, and asks the ambassador to make apologies in that regard to Stormcrow Cyneric of Greyholme Hall. Most funerals are quiet, discreet affairs. Details vary widely across the Commonwealth, from simple burial to ornate tombs to funeral pyres. This should not be a surprise. The Commonwealth is made up of many different cultures, just as the Empire is. The most common feature across the whole nation, however, is the creation and respect for memorials to the dead, especially those who have died fighting for the common good. These often take the form of white granite obelisks, inlaid with the names of the dead. More rarely, a statue of a soldier might be erected, not of any specific soldier, of course, because that level of individual aggrandizement is distasteful to many citizens of the Commonwealth, to commemorate a specific battle. Unlike less developed nations, it is comparatively rare to see depictions of a martial nature in the Commonwealth. Most statues of people are dedicated to philosophers and scholars who have expanded understanding of the common good and helped spread its teachings. A common tradition in the Commonwealth is that the soldiers fight for the greatest good, but it is the thinkers and teachers who help define precisely what that common good is. There is also a historic distaste for vain statues and the like, due to its widespread practice in the time of the old monarchies, where funds would be fruitlessly frittered away on arrogant and expensive monuments to people whose only claim to significance lay in their noble blood. A sun-gold tablet. So far, Dibirtilung has been reasonably successful. The visiting scholars have been taking advantage of various invitations to visit with their fellow academics, including a trip to the Great Library of Hercynion at the invitation of Nathair Autumngale, the advisor on the Valorn. During their stay, they expressed a great deal of interest in a certain cracked tablet recovered from the depths of the northern sinkhole, which details the practice of fashioning a particular form of sun-gold, an alloy of orichalcum and mithril that it seems has remarkable properties to store and transfer heat and warmth. After making a cursory study of it, they were delighted by the techniques it presents. Dr. Lola Kunz, a scholar of the material sciences, asked as to what circumstances might convince the library to part with the tablet. The University of Volkovar has backed up the doctor's inquiry and confirmed that they are very interested in the lore it contains. The advisor on the Valorn has apparently set a price, and Ambassador Pridetalker has passed it along. It seems that it is quite acceptable to the university and to Dr. Kunz. As such, in return for allowing Lola to claim the tablet and bring it back to the university, the faculty at Volkovar commits to offer their expertise to the Empire in the future in a specific capacity. When Theranin is liberated from the Druge, they will offer their assistance to appraising how the territory might be restored. All that would be required is that the ambassador to the Commonwealth request that the university makes good on its promise, and they would dispatch experts to the Empire to explore ways to put their expertise at the disposal of the people of Theranin. In addition, they agree to make any material or applications that arise from a study of the tablet available to the Empire before any other world power. Professor Gelberg is by all accounts very put out by this development. The delegation is here to raise money for the war effort, not to pursue personal interests. Dr. Kunz remains unrepentant, however. Die Akademie der Aufsteigenden Well. Ambassador Prytalker has made a handsome offer to the Commonwealth to allow them to attend the Zemres Naval Academy for a fee. Unfortunately, as Militar Attaché Schoningen points out, they have their own naval academies, and so there is not much appeal of visiting an imperial one as anything other than guests. There is no intention to be insulting here, it is simply that the Commonwealth takes all of the arts of war very seriously, and so has made its own study of the maritime battlefield. As a counter-offer, perhaps some of the imperial admirals would be interested in visiting the Commonwealth. The generals would be prepared to offer the chance to study at Akademie der Aufsteigenden Well, the Academy of the Cresting Wave, in Küstenstadt. This academy is particularly dedicated to the study of defensive maritime warfare, and has supplied admirals over the years to both the unbreakable prow and the wings of justice. As near as the civil service can make out, a 6-month semester of study here would allow the Empire to provide benefits related to strategies and tactics designed to specifically reduce casualties in naval engagements for a suitably equipped and trained Imperial Navy. That is, create a navy with a specific defensive quality. The generals propose that the Imperial Ambassador liaise with the Military Council and determine whether or not they wish to take advantage of this offer. Obviously, Commonwealth citizens attend the Academy free of charge, but hopefully the Ambassador understands that there would be a small fee for Imperial students. 50 thrones would cover the entire semester. Principalities of Yarm. One of the 6 great powers, the Principalities of Yarm are no friends to the Empire. The Majocracy, ruled by the House of Princes, resents what it claims are repeated attempts by Imperial citizens to interfere with its interests. Via the Liberty Pact, the Empire is allied with Yarm's enemies, the Commonwealth, and open war now rages between the two great nations. They may not be at war with the Empire, but they know that Imperial citizens and the Imperial Conclave in particular have provided significant assistance to their rivals. Communications tend to be brusque, bordering on the curt. The Yarmish ambassador to the Empire is Lord Magister Anton Trescher of the Hidden Hook, who attends at the House of Princes. A canny and influential politician who has served the House of Princes for over 40 years. He represents the Yarmish to the Empire, and vice versa. A potent master of autumn magic, he is known for his sarcasm and dry wit, and for his commitment to the sovereignty of the principalities he serves. On diplomacy. Lord Magister Anton Trescher thanks the ambassador for their words, and appreciates the effort they are going to. However, there still appears to be a misapprehension. The Yarmish ambassador mentioned the Iron Confederacy as an illustration, rather than anything else, of how shallow the Liberty Pact ultimately is. The House of Princes has absolutely no interest in proving anything to the Liberty Pact. The idea that any great power might need to prove anything to another is untenable. Yarm has no interest in presenting evidence that Yarm no longer falls under the definition of slavery. Why would it? It is a sovereign nation, and it has the fundamental right to do whatever it wishes within its own borders, just as the House of Princes respects the right of the Empire to do the same. So there will be no evidence of the social mobility within the slave caste, and no evidence that could support the other points of the definition for the ambassador to present to the Imperial Senate, or to Imperial allies. To do so would be to accept the right of the Liberty Pact to stand in judgment of the Principalities of Yarm. It is that arrogance which is unacceptable to the Yarmish princes. The idea that an influx of trade this would create would more than make up for any income that is and would be lost in slave trade cessation misunderstands the basic problem. Yarm will not be dictated to by outside powers. It is as simple as that. The Empire may, by all means, refuse to trade with Yarm, but the people of this elder nation will not sell their pride for a few merchant vessels today any more than it would in the time of Ambassador Oswy Triceburn. In a more mellow missive, sent shortly after the more angry one, Lord Magister Tresher explains that he does understand that Ambassador Imatan is doing their best to try and unpick a difficult situation. There are plenty of people in Yarm who would also very much like the two nations to be on better terms. But the fact remains that with the best will in the world, that ambassador after ambassador has tried to change imperial relations with Yarm by trying to change Yarm. Imagine, the Lord Magister adds, if Yarm were to inform the Empire that in order to keep trading with Yarm and its allies, it must stop following the way. How would the Empire respond to such a demand? Would they acknowledge Yarm's right to make such demands of them and look to see what compromises they could make? Surely their pride would not allow such a response. Spice. As to the matter of the magician prince of Vizaka and their spice grinder, the response is a little mixed, according to Lord Magister Anton. The grinder was indeed intended as a gift for the prince, but it was stolen by imperial pirates in early 372 YE. The crafter, Tamari Jasakim, was killed during the raid. It was presumed lost along with the rest of the cargo, a shipment of Janas Perez and a significant amount of mundane spice. Now it has arrived in Vizaka, a decade and a half after it was pirated. The prince it was intended for is now dead. Her niece now holds the position. It is difficult to determine exactly what the ambassador wants. The Prince of Vizaka thanks them for returning the stolen grinder, but feels it would be inappropriate to deliver any kind of reward, given that it was imperial thieves that stole the item in the first place. For his part, Lord Magister Tresher thanks the ambassador for their good intentions. Honourable people should return stolen goods to those they have been taken from, after all. Free ports and free people. Nobody at the Imperial Embassy to Yarm has ever heard of Zemelslo before. The fact that a port called Radosmo exists in this nation has never crossed their desks or their minds. The world is full of small nations whose influence extends no further than the continents on which they live, and whose prosperity is tied inextricably to the larger nations who are their neighbours. Most of these minor nations are small enough that they rely on their nearest neighbour for protection. Zemelslo is no exception. It is by all accounts a de facto protectorate of the Yarmish principalities. Self-governed by a concilium of magicians, it rules itself, on paper at least. In practice, it takes its marching orders from the princes. Initial research provides more information but little context. Membership of the concilium is by examination, with power awarded to those who can demonstrate the most magical power. On the face of it, it appears to be an egalitarian structure. In practice, it is riven by corruption, with individuals striving for the patronage of certain eternals, the better to advance their own position. There is little in the way of virtue here, but there are constant undercurrents of freedom and anarchy, essential rights to which are enshrined in the island's laws. It is not a wealthy nation and is largely dependent on Yarm for supplies of mana crystals, mostly paid for with exports of salted fish and a strong sour beverage called bidderskit, an alcoholic drink made from fermented goat's milk which is then distilled. It is, to say the least, something of an acquired taste. At the request of the House of Princes, the Concilium of Zemelslo have extended an offer to imperial merchant ships to dock at Radosmo, effectively the capital, with a view to trade. While there is zero demand for bidderskit in the Empire, Yarmish merchants dock there all the time, so imperial merchants docking there would be welcome to trade with other visitors. That would give them access to the same kinds of products that are available in Yarm, but without needing to actually dock there. Having investigated as best they can, the civil service have discovered that Prince Myla, the ruler of the Principality of the Violetinu Mishkas, is behind the push. This young prince is deeply involved with Yarm's foreign policy and is not content to simply accept the status quo. As best anyone can surmise, this new port is intended to see if the Empire are genuine about wanting to trade with Yarm, and looking for a way to enable that, or whether they are simply hiding behind the terms of the Liberty Pact to support the Commonwealth's embargo without having to come out and actually say that. Exploiting this obvious loophole to trade with Yarm is likely to annoy the Commonwealth, a fact that only makes the whole thing more appealing to the young prince and his supporters. As written, any competent advocate could make a persuasive argument that trade with Zemelslo, a sovereign nation, is not prohibited by the terms of the Liberty Pact. It's not actually part of Yarm, it's just a tiny nation on Yarm's borders that pretty much does whatever the House of Princes tells it to. Taking that approach risks annoying the Commonwealth. If they discover what is happening, they're likely to immediately try to rewrite the terms of the pact to prohibit trade with all Yarm's close allies, which would definitely include Zemelslo. Given the complexity of the situation, the Civil Service have instructed the Office of the Speaker for the Senate to raise an administrative Senate motion at the Saturday evening Senate session to confirm that the Senate agrees that trade with Zemelslo is permitted under the terms of the Liberty Pact.